Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast, episode 25. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about. It's Tuesday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, and I'm not Irish enough because I'm still sober. It's big, scary world out there right now, and I'll try to make sense of some of what's happening in the financial markets while also noting some silver linings in the midst of the panic over COVID-19. We'll discuss this and a lot more, but before I do, I want to remind you that you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. Live streams, they happen on YouTube and DLive.tv every Monday night at 8 and Friday night at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. Warning, I'm a bad boy with a potty mouth, and I am not afraid to use it. You can also support verified publishers like me by downloading and installing the Brave browser, where you can get paid in crypto tokens called BAT for voluntarily being served internet advertising as opposed to feeding the Google beast. Now, Brave protects your online privacy while saving you time and bandwidth by blocking all those pesky data snoopers, etc., that are feeding the growing surveillance state. Use my referral code at brave.com/Tom405 to support the podcast directly. If you use Brave for more than 30 days, I'll get the referral fee. And lastly, you can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the private market reports published every Wednesday and Sunday, and or the Gold, Goats, and Guns monthly investment newsletter designed to wrap up all the geopolitical chaos, the global macroeconomics, and the shifting cultural trends into a portfolio strategy designed to help you make sense of a world going mad. Speaking of a world going mad, we have financial meltdown. It's here, it's big, and it's frankly bigger than just about everybody wants to admit it is. And I want to focus on why it is. I wrote an article the other day about this, asking, has anybody informed the ECB that they're broke? Because the European Central Bank is bankrupt. It just doesn't want to admit it yet. It's going to need a bailout from the IMF. Central banking at a fundamental level is a Ponzi scheme, just like all fractional reserve banking is a Ponzi scheme. And we live in a world bank socialism. It's been this way for a long, long time. We have central control over the issuance of new monetary units through our governments and through the issuance of debt. And central banking is the transmission mechanism of this. It actually subsidizes and underwrites all of the socialist tendencies in our society. It creates the corporatism on the one hand championed by the Republicans and the outright communism advocated on the left by the Democrats. But it's two flavors of the same poison trying to kill the victim and arguing which is the better one and the more efficient one at doing it. What's interesting about this crisis is that it is what we have been in the libertarian/Austrian school of economics been waiting for and expecting for a long time, and that is that this crisis will be bigger than any of the central banks. The last crisis was bigger than the Federal Reserve, and it forced a lot of people to have to come together, a lot of central banks to come together and coordinate the global bailout. It cost tens of trillions of dollars. It hollowed out the lower middle classes. It gave rise to Occupy Wall Street and this resurgence of idiotic democratic socialism of Bernie Sanders and Richard Wolff and the rest of these people, which is all just euphemisms for the same nonsense that we've been dealing with the downstream effects of for over a century. Central banking has done nothing but paper over all of the inefficiencies and all of the bribes that they, the banking class and the government class, have wanted to accomplish by paying a small portion of that to the socialists in labor unions and in other areas of the economy. So we give them a sop in the form of labor unions, and we give them a sop in the form of a great society and a welfare state and socialized medicine, which we have in the United States. We have the worst kind of socialized medicine service, where we've privatized all the profit and socialized all the costs, and it's ridiculous. The costs are completely out of control. We've got unbelievable layers of bureaucracy at every level. No one's actually interested in care, and that was all designed. And the whole thing was designed to create a kind of debt feudalism that would make the people just rich enough to stay quiescent, but ultimately poor enough that they can't break out of it. Now, by the way, that's not going to happen. And the reason that's not going to happen is because capitalism and the voluntary exchange of goods and services just wrote human ingenuity, stubbornness, and the simple fact is that eventually you run out of other people's money will undermine all. That is what's fundamentally causing this financial meltdown today. And there's no other way to describe this. And the central banks are not going to survive this with the public's confidence. It's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, they've already been revealed as swimming naked, and the tide just went out. At the very highest levels of the global financial system today, everybody knows that the central banks are trapped. It is starting to filter down into the real economy. And what's important now is that we, who are the advocates of the free market, need to make this abundantly clear. I was on Sputnik Radio yesterday with Political Misfits, and Jamal Thomas wanted to immediately go into, a problem with our society is that it's all about profit. And he used profit the way all Marxists do, as a pejorative. Well, Jamal was wrong about that, and I immediately hit him with everything, every barrel I could, as quickly as possible, which got quoted, by the way, the main site on Sputnik yesterday, because I tied it all together very quickly to say the same things I'm saying now. The central banks are anathema to human advancement. They are nothing more than loan sharks. And everybody who gets paid up and down the line gets a part of the VIG, while the productive portion of the economy is hollowed out and forced to work longer hours for less pay. In this respect, the left is absolutely correct in their criticism of what's happening and what has happened. The prescription is to let the entire thing collapse. Now, during this process, where the central banks don't have any real tools to stop the meltdown, because they don't, all they can do is inflate. And eventually we will lose confidence that all they can do is inflate. Debt is going to become a dirty word. Hard assets are going to be the only thing that people care about. Gold, real estate, claims on tangible property in the form of stock certificates. Claims on tangible property were going to matter. And I'm going to throw cryptocurrencies into that mix as well, because the people who understand how cryptocurrencies are designed understand that math is just as powerful as land is. Because at the end of the day, math is what defends the cryptocurrency from attack, from theft. And in all things, in all aspects of our economic life, we have to not only have savings and be able to work in order to create savings, but we also have to be able to defend that work and that savings. And that comes in the form of, how do we defend the value of the money? Money has to become sovereign again. We have to take the issuance of new monetary units away from the central banks, because they have been proven to be terrible stewards of our money, along with our governments. And so over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to have this fight as the system melts down. And new monetary systems will rise and fall until something new and stable shakes out of this. It will be very similar to the period between 1968 and 1971, after the London gold pool fell, and then we tried a couple of interim things, and eventually Nixon closed the gold window, and we went on to the situation we have today, which I call Milton Friedman's nightmare of competitive devaluating currencies, all based on debt, which is insane. Between now and then, there's going to be a lot of what we're currently going through now. It's not going to be every day. We're not going to be dealing with 3,000 point swings in the Dow every day. This will subside in the next couple of weeks, but every so often, every 6 months, every year, every so often, there's going to be a major spasm. There's going to be a major lockup in the world financial system, as whatever fix du jour from 6 months ago blows up. Because the people who are trying to fix the system want to fix it in such a way that they remain in control. And the only way they remain in control is to try and paper over their past mistakes. Now, once they have been removed from the situation, it's only then that we can get the rationality. And in the process, there's going to be a lot of inflation. There's going to be a lot of deflation. They're going to fight back and forth. And eventually, those who have hard asset savings today will be far richer in terms of actual wealth, maybe not in terms of dollars, but in terms of purchasing power, than they were at the beginning of this. And that's what Gold, Goats, and Guns is all about. It's always been about this. Always been about trying to figure out a way to make sure you can protect as much of your savings as possible and lever those savings into excellent long-term investments that will pay you back tenfold. Because when they start to finally rise, when those undervalued assets are finally properly valued, life-changing money will occur. So in the near term, we're going to be looking at more of what we've already seen. Multiple trillion-dollar-plus bazookas will be fired multiple times. They won't work. The IMF is going to step in and save the ECB first. It may even happen before the end of the week. Okay, with the situation in Italy as acute as it is, and with things happening in Germany and other places around Europe, look, multiple European banks are already effectively insolvent. And now the question is, how are they going to move in order to stabilize the situation? At what point do they finally make that move? And the rate at which they move is going to be a lot slower than they need to move, because there is no political consensus for what to do in Europe. In the United States, the Fed has already made a lot of moves. The United States government has already made a lot of moves. They may not be the right moves, but they've been moves. And the simple fact of the matter is, as dysfunctional as our political system is, and our financial system is, it at least is oriented along a particular line that is to preserve what is currently there. Even if what's currently there is terrible in any objective sense, it's still a node of stability, as it were. Whereas in Europe, they haven't decided yet what they actually want to do. Germany is still fighting with the rest of the EU as to what the structure of their banking system should look like. That alone is what's causing 90% of the problems here. That difference in policy is what's causing the problems. Is what actually caused the problem 6 months ago, which caused the repo markets to blow up. And now we're dealing with the downstream effects of this as COVID-19 runs through and blows up the idea that we have supply chains that can actually survive any of this. And, all of this very delicately balanced debt and derivative cross-currency hedging and all the rest of it, that's all very, very, very finely balanced. It's like a house of cards. And all it takes is, one to go away and then the whole thing collapses. And it's going to collapse hard. And it's already collapsing hard. And it's going to get worse. European bond yields are rising by the rate of 20 to 30 basis points per day. Go look at it. In my latest article that I just talked about earlier, I got 4 charts. I could have put up 12. I decided to, take pity on the EU and only put up 4. And today, those charts are even more ridiculously vertical. Rising rates are going to gut what's left of the European banking system. Everything the ECB has been oriented along for the last 5, 6, 7 years with negative interest rates has been to push the rate of interest on Eurobond debt, Italian debt, Portuguese debt, Spanish debt, whatever, to push them down as far as possible. As U.S. rates fell and German rates fell on safe haven buying, the ECB's in there buying up Italian and Portuguese debt, and along with momentum traders front-running those purchases in order to push Italian debt down so that the Italians' budget doesn't blow out while they try to service all the ridiculous amount of debt. They're trying to refinance at lower and lower and ever lower rates, but eventually you just come to the point where no one believes that we should be paying negative 1% for an Italian one-year bond. Like, are you kidding me? Really? At some point, the whole thing has to just stop. And there are no more greater fools to sell the next round of debt to. So the bailouts are going to start. So interesting point this morning. Deutsche Bank credit default swap spreads are spiking, meaning default risk. The market is now finally believing that Deutsche Bank is insolvent and can't meet its obligations. 75% of the interest rate swaps in the Eurozone are cleared through Deutsche Bank. If Deutsche Bank goes belly up and there's a couple $100 trillion of interest rate swaps that can't clear, what happens then? The entire system seizes up. If that goes, the whole Eurobond system collapses. The ECB destroyed the sovereign debt bond market with all of its bond purchases, with all of its negative interest rates. It destroyed the euro as a potential replacement for the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It was the dumbest thing they could have ever done, was to go to negative interest rates. And you got to wonder if Mario Draghi, as president of the ECB during all this time, still worked for Goldman Sachs, knowing full well that by destroying the euro as a potential reserve currency, it ensured that the dollar stayed king. You got to ask yourself that question. So right now, the only way out is for an IMF bailout and a reconversion to Eurobonds. And that is Lagarde's job, is to get rid of all the national sovereign debt and redenominate it after a massive IMF bailout that turns them all into bonds issued in euros owned by the ECB, and take all the Italian debt off the books, take all the Spanish debt off the books. It's going to take more than $1 trillion to do this. The Germans are owed $850 billion in Italian bonds alone. it's going to take a lot more than $1 trillion. And the IMF was talking out of both sides of its mouth saying, hey, we're going to send a lot of this money to emerging markets. I got news for you. The only emerging market that's going to get paid out here is the European Union. But again, it's not going to work in the long run because the IMF can't lever that up in the long run without turning to gold to backstop its assets. What's it going to do eventually when confidence in the bonds and the loans that it has issued, 10, 12, 15, $18 trillion worth of debt? Eventually, they're going to have to just lever their gold reserves and do ultimately what Ira Harris suggests the EU does, which is take 15 to 20% of their gold reserves and cover euro bonds and buy up all the debt. But none of that can happen at $1,500 gold. There ain't enough gold in the world for that at $1,500 an ounce. $6,000 an ounce, $15,000 an ounce, and now we've got enough money. So for now, the collapse is real, and it will stabilize U.S. markets as capital flies here from the mess in Europe. And so American markets are going to stabilize. We may even see, some negative rates on the U.S. yield curve. I'm almost positive we'll see it. The Fed won't go there. Their discount window will stay at the zero bound. Jay Powell will drop helicopter money before he goes to negative interest rates. We'll see universal basic income before we go to negative interest rates. So ultimately, the Ponzi scheme of central banking has collapsed, and there aren't any more greater fools to sell the debt to. And now it's just a matter of watching all of these assets that had been levered up during this Ponzi scheme collapse back to some rational value. And remember, this was all started because Vladimir Putin said, hey, I think oil should be $30 a barrel, not 60, which he's right about, given the market dynamics. The rate at which things are accelerating are so high that the next thing I want to talk about is what happens with Italy. The EU's response to the COVID-19 outbreak in Italy has been nothing short of atrocious. It is going to destroy any sense of propriety and decency between Italians and the rest of Europe. I am Italian to the core of my being. All of my personality traits are classically Italian. And I can tell you something. The way the EU is treating Italy right now is shameful and is disrespectful in a way that turns Italians into cold-blooded killers. And I'm dead serious here. You do not disrespect Italians and kill their grandmothers. Italy is already at the point of saying everybody over the age of 80, you're on your own. We don't have the infrastructure. And nobody else in Europe is coming in to give them a hand. You get to a point where everyday Italians are burying their grandparents. They're going to turn to their government, which they already don't have a lot of faith in the first place. I mean, Italian government is like performance art, for Christ's sake. These people don't already believe it in the first place. And the last thing they're going to do is be okay with their government being powerless to get out of the EU the aid that they've already paid for. And it's going to cause a political upheaval in Italy that is going to take them out of the Eurozone when Matteo Salvini and the Brothers of Italy come in and take over. And I fully expect that to happen before the end of the year. And there's not a thing Angela Merkel can do about it. She has done everything imaginable to keep Giuseppe Conte in place as prime minister and to keep a Eurocentric and EU-centric government in Italy. I'm telling you, when this is over and the crisis is over, there are going to be political lynchings in Italy that will be epic. I told you for months now, I am long guillotines. I just went long rope makers. You cannot treat people like this and then say, oh, but we're one big European family. Yeah, affangulo. I don't know a lot of Italian. Affangulo. That's what's coming. The myth of globalization is over. Central banking has been the tool to create globalization. And we're going to need to get local quick if we want to survive this. And I've been saying that as well for a long time. We need to get out of dollar debt as much as possible. We need to minimize the number of dollars we need to get through our day as possible. Here in the United States, now is the time for this to happen. And it's going to be fearful. It's going to be hard. You're going to lose your jobs. I know how bad it's going to be. But I don't have any good answers for you other than have as many friends as possible. Get out of debt as much as possible. Or just say, I'm not paying that debt anymore. Feeding my family is more important, which is what's going to happen. And keep your humanity in all of this. And find ways to muddle through. And if you have to work with other people locally, if you have to work with your neighbors in a way that you never had before, maybe that's a good thing. It's what this is all about. We're going to get back to community and to caring after 140 years or 120 years of policy, which has destroyed our culture, our churches, our communities, and our families. This is what socialism wrought. This is what it brings. This is all it cares about. Because doctrinaire commies always wanted this, to have the state replace all of these things. We're seeing exploding Eurobond yields. The euro is collapsing. Gold is holding serve. And so much of the debt that's out there is now going to have to be forgiven, wiped out, or redenominated because the need for dollars is so acute, it's so off the charts, something's going to have to give. Bitcoin can assert itself here, or cryptos in general can start to assert themselves here for minor transactions like we've seen in places like Venezuela and Iran and other places that have gone through similar debts of money. We're going to see this in Europe. We're going to see it in other places around the world and other emerging markets. It's going to happen to the United States eventually too, just not yet. Bitcoin and other cryptos are going to be stores of value like gold, and they're going to be used for cross-border capital flight purposes to get around governments. But that's about it in the short term, because the governments have done a pretty good job of walling Bitcoin off from the main economy, unless that changes too. Maybe we'll see some revolts at the state level or the local level, which would be excellent, to be honest with you. Can actually change the dynamic. It would be good. Especially if the government gets smart and suspends tax payments and just says, look, the amount of money we bring in income taxes and excise taxes is minuscule compared to the amount of money we're going to print just to keep the bank solvent. And the money can stay locally. I can't, for the life of me, understand why they wouldn't just end income taxes tomorrow. There's no need for them. It would do so much good to the local economies. But we're going to see a very odd combination of assets rising right now. And it's going to start in the next couple of days. Gold, the dollar, stocks, U.S. stocks will all rise together in a weird safe haven trade. Tangible assets. And the dollar is still a tangible asset. Even though it's a debt instrument, even though it's terrible, even though it's horrible, it's still the thing, the currency that everybody values at this moment in time. Talk to me in 3 years. I'll have a different answer. But today, the dollar is still king. Portfolio rebalancing is what's happening right now. It's commencing in earnest now that the world has to reallocate capital around $30 a barrel of oil, not $60. And that's part of what is melting down. That capital has to be reallocated and moved and contracts unwound and derivatives defaulted on and all sorts of crazy stuff. There's going to be bankruptcies that are going to multiply. Failed banks will be the norm. It's going to be just like 2008, where every Friday afternoon the FDIC is going to announce all of its bank closures after the market closes, never during the week. They don't want to spook the markets, and they're going to put that out late in the afternoon on a Friday, like they did in 2008, 2009. But there are silver linings in this. There will be. And one of the great things I'm seeing already, I saw a note this morning on Zero Hedge, Amazon. I saw last night that Amazon was adding 100,000 employees to expand its distribution network because it's overmatched. People are staying home. They're buying online. This is where, and this is an opportunity where internet buying helps the society. Yeah, in general, internet buying is not necessarily good for the local economy. On that point, I will not argue with the leftists, even though I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. But then again, I live 25 miles outside of town. There ain't nothing for me to buy. And it's more expensive for me to drive into Gainesville to buy my stuff that I need, as opposed to just having it delivered to me by Amazon. And I'm willing to pay Amazon for the premium. It's what UPS and Amazon and all these logistics companies are good at, figuring out ways to serve the market. But what's really interesting is on top of that, they are now prioritizing delivery for essentials for those in self-quarantine over non-essentials. That means food, medicines, and the rest of it. As opposed to, I got an order in for a board game. I got news for you. I was like, ooh, I was looking last night. I spilled coffee all over my keyboard. One of my computers downstairs. I'm like, need to order a new keyboard. The order in, noted that one of the games that I really want was also, it was massively on sale. I'll buy that too. I got points on my Amazon card. I go to checkout, delivery Friday or Saturday for things that should normally be here in 2 days. And then I also noticed that there wasn't the option for me to pay to have them shipped to me earlier. because, I kind of need that keyboard. It's not there. I'm not going to get that keyboard until Friday. Amazon already started that prioritization process, and this is on Amazon Prime. It is what it is. Was I angry about it? No. But, my initial reaction was to go, well, can I pay the extra $4 to get it here earlier? They really are overmatched. And then I see this note this morning, and I'm telling you, this is immense on their part. This is what happens in a crisis situation. They can leverage their unmatched logistics to keep the flow of goods as steady as possible. Will prices rise a little bit? Yes, they will. And it's not even going to be likely very accretive to their bottom line because they're going to be putting second and third shifts on. It's their costs to get this stuff done will rise. It's like I've argued for years about post-hurricane market imbalances where we all need roofing shingles, but Corning's not allowed to raise the price of roofing shingles because they're not allowed to gouge for new roofing shingles. And so everybody has to deal with holes in their roof and visqueen over the holes in their roof for months on end so that the government can say, oh, look, you still only have to pay $30 a square for roofing shingles, even though the asphalt plants can run 24/7 and they can they take out of mothball their inefficient plants and, get the stuff up and running and get them to you for $50 a square. Nope, not allowed to do that. That's price gouging. That's socialism. That's a classic government barrier to a market clearing price. Amazon saying we can do this anyway. This is an amazing thing. Amazon is going to get so much goodwill from this. It's not funny. It's going to make sure that people get fed and get the antivirals or the antibiotics or whatever it is that they need. They're going to get them in a reasonable amount of time. They just added 100,000. They're adding 100,000 new people. I got news for you. All those newly out of work waiters and cooks become stockers and packers. They become drivers. And I'm going to be happy when they show up at my door on Friday with my non-essential keyboard and my really non-essential board game. And I won't care if I get a note from Amazon saying, hey, we can't get that to you until next Monday. I'll be like, oh well, okay, fine. Serve the people who need to be served. I can wait. Incredibly proud of the response here because this pokes the hole in the idea that the government can actually in any way, manner, shape, or form deliver care. At the same time Amazon is doing this, the Trump administration can't get testing to people for the coronavirus. Moreover, the story that Donald Trump tried to buy the exclusive rights so that the testing for the virus would only be given out to Americans so that everybody else can die. Like at that point, I heard that story. I ain't voting for Trump in November. He can go get stuffed. There are people dying out there. This is a public health crisis and you want to play MAGA games? Are you soulless fuck? No, absolutely not. The truth of the matter is that this is emblematic and an example of how the free market is going to outcompete government over the course of the next 10 years. Free market monies, free market solutions to these problems will be readily available to actually help people get through. And we have to overcome the noise coming from the envious and bile-filled socialists who cannot handle the fact that there are corporations and free market entities capable of something that government isn't, which is true service to the people. Do not understand this. They are just filled with bile and envy. They just want to see the world burn so that they can be proven right, even though they say, oh no, this is about practicality and not about ideology. Bullshit. Bullshit. This isn't ideology. This is fact. Amazon has unbelievable logistics and it can be used to alleviate suffering. Will they make some money along the way? Yes. Does that mean it's sustainable? Yes. Does that mean they'll be able to do it tomorrow to alleviate suffering tomorrow for the next person who gets sick? Yes. Is Amazon a white knight in shining armor and perfect in every way? No. There are no white knights. Everybody is good and evil. Everybody has a dark side. Problem with the left is that they refuse to integrate their own shadow in such a way that they can actually understand that the world is complicated and bad people can do good things and good people do bad things. And in this respect, Amazon today is serving the people and is showing what you can do when you have built something of lasting, sustainable value. That's not opinion. That's fact. People stand in line for 7 hours to get on a freaking plane before they get tested for coronavirus. And Amazon's shipping food, masks, and antivirals in 2 days. It's no different than in Katrina. No different than after Hurricane Harvey. Katrina, FEMA's response to Katrina was so bad, it created the Cajun Navy down here. You guys not heard of that? The Cajun Navy is the guys with all their bass boats and the pick-em-up trucks that the bicoastal libs can't stand. And those guys all showed up in Texas to help get people out of their homes who are sitting on rooftops and get food and supplies and medical equipment to them. They were barred during Katrina. I know people who took their boats from Cedar Key across the Gulf, over to Louisiana, and were turned away by the Coast Guard at gunpoint for trying to bring medical supplies and trying to bring food and water to people, trying to get them out of there. Private help was shut down. Harvey was different. By then, they realized the mistakes. They realized how terrible it was. Government always wants control, and they always want to take credit for this when it's people and their charity that will always save the day. The truth of the matter is that it doesn't matter whether Amazon is doing this because it's going to be good for them in terms of goodwill with the population. That's what the leftists will say here. Oh, well, they're just doing it because they want the goodwill. Yes, so? What the hell's wrong with you? Why are you so filled with bile? Why are you so envious of this? Why do you have to, tear down a good thing? Because you're a freaking slimy Marxist is why. And to be honest with you, you go fuck yourself. You've got no patience for it. You people have ruined the world with your nonsense. And now the comeuppance comes. And I can't wait to watch it happen. Okay, this has been the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns podcast for St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 2020. If you like what you heard today, a little nastier than normal, please like it, subscribe to it, pass it out to your friends. There will be notes to all the articles and ideas referenced today in the show notes. We'll be back next Tuesday for another one. So you guys take care. You be well. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.